I want to think about doing the thing I've been looking forward to from the start, and that is making the head. So I got some sheet steel here. It's about 2.5mm thick. That may help. And what I'm going to do, I think, is going to try and fettle a head out of this. But that'll work. I need another one the same though. Okay, so those sides are in place. Got to fill up these gaps with weld, but that's good. And we will put a big couple of beads along here. Basically add a bit of meat which will grind away to form the jawline.
That little movement there did not save the screen of my phone. Well, there we go. Anyway, I think you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just forming the lower half of the mask, the jaw, using that 2.5mm sheet. That's giving me the basic structure, and then I'm just adding material, and then we'll sculpt that later on with a flat disc and an angle grinder.
Right, well, with a crude way to do it, but that is going to work. We'll do the same here. Right, start with the predator's head. This is where we're at. Got a jaw, got to do some sculpting, grinding, whatever you want to call it, and that's sort of what I'm modelling it on, this bad boy here. So let's do a bit of that.
So this is a very similar process to how I rework the neck armour, where I'm just laying down material with a MIG welder, and then I'm shaping it or sculpting it, if you like, with the flat disc and an angle grinder. Quite a repetitive process, laying down material, grinding it, filling any gaps, welding, grinding, you know, just repeating the same thing. Always referring to the photos of the predator, trying to work out, you know, where I need to add stuff, where I need to take it away. And probably about 2.5 hours work to get the mask to the point where you'll see it at the end of this little segment. Okay, lost a little bit of footage here with a full memory card, but basically I've just attached a spoon that forms the top of the head, and I've chosen a couple of teaspoons that will form the eyes.
So this is where we ended up at the end of the day. A lot of tidying up to do, but that is starting to really look like a predator. Really happy with the jawline here. Eye sockets, this is what needs a lot of tidying up. This will have to all be welded and ground. There's another piece that goes around here.
Okay, going to start building up the arm gauntlets now. So I'm flattening a spoon in the vise, and I'm going to bend that over to form a three-sided section, and then we use another spoon to form the underside.
So that's the top half there. This is our facing backwards that way. It's getting there. So this is just a little bit to go on the gauntlet.
So I'm going to use a couple of nails here to wrap around that top piece of the gauntlet, and we'll do a little bit more detailing at the end of the build. We'll add a piece on top of that and give it a bit of additional shape. Right, a bit of simple leg armour here. I'm just going to use dessert spoons. I'm going to cut them to the approximate shape of some leg armour I've seen on a photo of a Predator. And I'm just going to stack them one on top of the other, just tack weld them onto the leg, and that should give a nice finished effect. Okay, so I want to make some shoulder armour next. There's 4 pieces on each side, so I've made a paper template which I'm then transferring to the remains of that door kick plate. Cutting out 4 pieces, and they fit one inside another, and they need just a little bit of trimming so that the fit is satisfactory. So that's what I'm just doing here. Once I'm happy with the fit, I'm going to tack it on the inside so that it's one complete piece. And then on the sides here there's an overlap from piece to piece, so what I'm actually going to do shortly is I'm going to weld over the whole front piece there, and then again just using the angle grinder I'm going to grind that flat. So that piece is pretty much done. I'm not going to show you the other side because it's just a repetition of the same process. So instead we'll move on to the first part of the backpack / shoulder cannon. So I'm just marking out a simple box section on this thin door kick plate, bending over one side here with a bit of wood to give a nice sharp edge, and then the other side it has to fit around a couple of spoons on the centre of the back, so I'm just taking time and trouble to get this just right so it's a nice smooth fit over those 2 spoons. Having done that, I'm left with quite a boring square box shape, so what I'm doing here is just basically just trying to make it a little bit more interesting. It's not really orthodox Predator, if you like, but it's much better shape. So that's the top bent over to form an angled side, and then I want to put a curve all the way down one side. So I'm basically slicing the box open with a cutting disc, bending the resultant flap, which I'm doing here, so it's a nice tight fit, and then tack welding it in place. I've not done a lot of this thin sheet metal work before, but the key seems to be using a thin wire, like a 0.6 mig welding wire, and low power, and then you put in 2 or 3 tacks at a time, move along an inch, and then 2 or 3 tacks, and that way you don't put too much heat into the sheet, and that avoids any warping and distortion. And then you go back and tack over the gaps and grind the edge flush. And this is the last bit. I'm just closing the sides in at the bottom to form a sort of tapered point. Okay, so this is quite an important and fiddly piece for the overall look of the figure, in that it completes the waist, the transition from the leg to the upper body. So again, I'm using some of that door kick plate, probably 4 or 5 trial fittings to get the shape about right, and a bit of hammering and gentle persuasion to get it in. And then when I'm happy, I'll just tack it in place. And then I want to think about covering it up with a belt, and the Predators have this little piece that hangs down the front as well. So previous projects have given me a whole load of spoon handles, quite a few of which have patterns on. I've chosen this square sort of grid effect I have a couple of handles for, so I've bent them to the correct radius around that hoover pipe, and I'm just fitting them on either side to complete the belt. Then I want this front piece, which again is just a bit of patterned spoon handle, which has a sort of tribal look to it, looks a bit like alien text perhaps, so that fits quite nicely down the front. And then one more piece that forms the buckle just above that. Right, the next job is a couple of little bags the Predator has hanging off his belt. So again, using that thin door kick plate, I'm just cutting out the rough shape of a bag, slightly oversized, and then my plan is to fold over maybe 2 millimeters around the edge all the way around, and when welded flush to the body, that will give the impression of a complete bag. Then I'm just going to finish the skirt by slicing it into strips, and then using an angle grinder I'm just going to give a sort of torn fabric effect all the way along the bottom.
Okay, I want to do some hair today and try and get the helmet finished, neatened up, and then we'll crack on with hands and feet and weapons and things like that. So I've got an old shower rack here, something like that. I think this is around about the right diameter for the dreadlocks, so I'm going to cut a piece off that and trial fit it.
What I'm doing first of all though is just completing the sides and the back of the head with 3 spoons, and the dreadlocks will enclose all of that. So this is the first piece I'm just making here, the first bit of shower rack, and everyone is basically done in the same way. I'm bending it, in that particular instance, around the round part of a hammer, and getting it to the shape I'm happy with, and then tacking it in place. So I am going to time lapse through most of this process. It's very samey. In total there's probably between 6.5 and 7 feet of dreadlocks in total, maybe 40 pieces. Quite a time consuming afternoon. But overall quite happy with the look, and after a few hours work it ended up looking a little bit like this. Okay, the final part should be out shortly. I want to say thanks very much for watching, and again, if you can like and subscribe, I genuinely appreciate it, and if you're able to share it on social media so that more people can see what I'm doing, I'd hugely appreciate that as well. Thanks.